Welcome to the Phoenix Prosperity Podcast, where wealth meets legacy. Join your host, Tim Fergestad, as we explore the journeys of Phoenix's finest to success and beyond.
Right. Hello, this is Tim Fergestad. Thank you for joining us. I'm very pleased to have Derek Lundsten with me here today. Derek is currently the President and Chief Culture Officer at Lifeguides, a transformative platform for conscious leaders and value-driven cultures. Welcome to the show, Derek.
Hey, thanks, Tim. It's an honor to be here with you.
Thank you. So what? Oh, sorry.
In our shared community of Phoenix, Arizona.
That's right. That's right. So why don't you give us a quick snapshot of your business right now?
Yeah, at a core level, we've built a technology platform that facilitates people who have been through different life experiences, life events, life challenges to become mentors, or what we call guides, for someone going through those same or very similar experience, event, or challenge. So you might think of becoming an aging parent for loved one, or becoming a caregiver for aging parents, or becoming a parent to a new child, or relocating for a promotion, or transitioning from active duty military to civilian life, or managing your stress, or a whole slew of unique topics and challenges. But the interface kind of looks like what you might consider like an Airbnb or a Match, but rather than seeing profiles of a property or a dating partner, you would see a profile of a human being, someone who's been through that particular event that you find yourself now in, and you can receive human support, wisdom, guidance, and access to resources through that relationship. And so our model is we sell this as a subscription to companies and organizations and employers who then offer it to their employees and their families as a benefit of sorts. And we have a number of clients here in the Valley, as well as clients all over North America that are currently supporting. So
excellent. That sounds amazing because, well, for a number of reasons. One of the biggest problems I think most people have when they run up to something is they feel alone, right? They don't have any support in that sense, as well as, I mean, you can Google stuff nowadays, but it's nowhere near the same thing, right? You're still alone. But
one of our phrases actually in one of our decks is imagine a world where no one is left to navigate life alone, right? That's actually a tagline that we have.
Excellent.
And to your point, yes, there's lots of amazing information out there through Google, or if you use AI and ChatGPT, but and other tools like that. But there's nothing quite as valuable or invaluable as a real person who has that firsthand knowledge and insight, and they can bring that to you and interpret that to you in a way that, frankly, provides hope, provides support, provides a connection and a relationship, and actually helps someone on their path in a much more, whole way. As opposed to ethereal information and searching for that. So
right, for sure, and the nuances are lost, right? Because it's nice to be able to ask details and clarifying questions and so forth as well. You and I are both not natives of Phoenix. We're here by choice, and we like it here. But my point of that is it's kind of common nowadays for families to break apart, right? That's one of the things I miss is my kids don't have cousins nearby. We don't have all the big family gatherings and so forth. And that's kind of a big part of the networking and that we used to have, we don't have anymore. Everybody's scattered to the wind. And even though Phoenix is the 5th largest metro area in the US, there's so many people are here from other places and they don't have those connections, which is, I think, a huge boon. And in fact, specifically in Phoenix, which is I'm not used to coming from the Midwest, a lot of the houses have these brick walls and stuff. So the garage door goes up, the car goes in, the garage door goes down. You don't really connect with your neighbors very well, particularly when it's hot out. We don't hang out on the streets and have lawn parties and stuff like I'm used to.
Well, so a couple of things on that. So one, I think that's another reason why we exist, right? Is the idea that communities have changed and the social norms of people gathering together to share stories and to share their challenges, where historically people belong to faith communities or they belong to, different groups, the Elks Club and different things of that nature. Those are things the attendance of those organizations has dropped significantly in the last couple of generations. And so we're filling a gap that exists in that need for connection
And community.
and community in the broader context. And then I agree with you. It's probably the single largest downside to living in Arizona from my point of view is that all of our family, my wife and I, everyone, all the cousins, the grandparents, everyone's back on the East Coast. And so we have to be very intentional to go back and see them or host them to come here to maintain those relationships. But you're right. It's a lot, this community is a lot of the melting pot of people who have come from different places, and there's not as strong of that familial relationship that exists in other places that we had back east, for example. But I will say, I'm fortunate that where I live, I live in a neighborhood that does have a nice community format where people are getting outside and spending time in
Okay.
parks and getting to their neighbors, and we've been blessed in that respect, personally at least. So
Is,
that's
is that a result of a just a more proactive HOA, or is
yeah.
there a driving force?
I think that's a big part of it. I think that's a big part of it. I think that also just demographically, for whatever reason, the neighborhood that we're in has a lot of younger families, and so the kids are out playing, and it just kind of encourages parents to be out and doing that. And
Okay.
I think that's a factor of it. But yeah, we've been fortunate in that respect.
For sure. That's one of the saving graces is having kids, and then you know all the kids programs and going to the soccer
Yeah,
games and stuff like that. That's largely how we've met a lot of our friends here in
yeah,
Arizona is
yeah,
through without that we struggling for those sorts of connections for sure.
yeah. Yeah, I think that's a key part of it. So it requires you to seek it out, right? To be intentional and to be part of building those connections. Fortunately, people are very friendly here, so that's a big part of it. And then we've also been able to find a church community here that's been wonderful for our family. It's close by, so that's been nice as well. But to your point, what brought us out here in the first place was Lifeguides and kind of the idea of the Phoenix Prosperity podcast. So at the time, this is pre-COVID, right? We got here right before COVID. So that was a wild experience being
Okay.
in quarantine in a new city with not a lot of community.
Sure.
It really brought our core unit together in a really
Okay.
interesting fun way. But what brought us here, at the time, we weren't quite sure where the headquarters of Life Guides was going to be. We were a virtual team, pre-virtual remote
Okay.
work. So we had a team up in San Francisco, we had a team in Miami, we had a team in the Philadelphia area, which is where I was living at the time, Charleston, South Carolina, which we thought might have been the hub at one point, and then Phoenix. And for whatever reason, the Phoenix metro area kind of gained steam, where a lot
Okay.
of the large, one of our executive team at the time was from this area, and we were like, "Oh, that's interesting." And as we kind of started to look at it, we said, well, there's some really fascinating and cool attributes about Phoenix, particularly for Life Guides, but in general. One is that there's a large university. Obviously, ASU is one of the largest public universities, and it's got a huge
Yep.
and growing population. And the reputation of the quality of its education is increasing and has been over the last couple of decades. Secondly, we have a large what I'll call young retiree community, fairly well educated and affluent, and still able to contribute. And from a guide's perspective, able to share their wisdom and their insight
Yes.
and desire to help people in a big way. So we kind of have these two polarities of talent, of the
Hmm.
emerging talent and the what I'll call the later stage of their career talent, or that what they're looking to give back. And so we thought that was fascinating. Then keep in mind pre-COVID, we said, okay, it's a secondary market, as they call it, from a capital market standpoint. So it was the cost of living was appealing, taxes were low. There was a friendly government at the time saying we want to bring businesses here, and we could
Right.
easily pop up to LA or San Francisco or to New York, which were the capital centers on a direct flight, or Miami, which has been growing now over the last years on a direct flight. And so there was a lot
Okay.
we liked about just its access, its positioning, the affordability, the talent market. And one of the things we saw from a tech standpoint is that really there had been no real tech unicorn that had come out of the valley. And we were like, wouldn't it be amazing to build that company and become like the company that people were like, wow, that company came out of Phoenix. And what would that do to create economic growth and opportunity and bringing and getting the talent to continue to stay and to reinvest that capital? And so
Right.
my partners and I were drawn to that actually, and we were like, that's a pretty cool opportunity.
Yep.
And then so I moved out here, in the begin right around this time 5 years ago, and then 60 days later or so we had the lockdown. Not even 60 days later of the lockdown of COVID, and the whole environment has shifted, and the macro world has shifted in profound ways, as we all can agree. But I think a lot of what we liked about Phoenix is still very much true, and I think if anything has gotten stronger in certain ways. So. Yeah.
Mhm. Okay. Yeah. And the economy, yeah, job growth and in a tech sense, this is what the Silicon Desert. It's booming.
Yeah.
So in that sense, right, there's quality job growth, which is one of the best indicators for what I do, which is
Yes.
real estate investing. Um, I'd like to point out and get your thoughts on the intentionality of your system, actually, because you can get these with family or through your church. You can get support for different things, but it's hard to know. You have to know somebody that, maybe,
Yeah.
right? Whereas you have a more structured version of this, which gets to the heart of the matter a lot quicker, and people can get the support they need uh,
Yeah.
much more
So
effectively.
great comment. I'm glad you realized that. So one of our trademarks is this concept, this phrase that Life Guides is more casual than therapy, more qualified than a friend, right? And
Okay.
that statement embodies exactly what you're describing because pre-COVID especially, we heard a lot about this mental health crisis and this idea of stigma and that people were not getting the support they needed because they were afraid to
Right.
be vulnerable and they couldn't find the resources that they needed. And there was this underlying issue that was happening. And what we saw was this idea that through peer support or peer mentorship or peer guidance, you would reduce that stigma because you're talking with someone who's been in your shoes, literally. So there's no judgment, there's no stigma, there's no dogma. There's just two human beings who have an understanding of a shared experience and the emotions, the considerations, the questions that happen through that. So that's the one side of the more casual than therapist, right? More casual than
Mhm.
therapy. And on the other side, to your point, you might not want to go to your friends or your family with certain topics because they might not give you good advice, frankly, because they have a bias about you or they have a vested interest in certain outcomes, or you just have a lot of history and people can't see past certain stories or patterns, and it causes
Right.
challenges in the dynamics in the family. And so having
Right.
someone that has that just a step removed that's
Yep.
kind of like a friend because you know that they're there because they want to help you and
hmm
they're there for a reason
That
to help
that
you.
that's a big psychological barrier that's been knocked out of the way, which is huge.
Bingo. So now we've knocked out barriers on both sides, right? There's access to care and the stigma that prevents it, as well as, family and dynamics that allow people to not go into this area. And so now there's a kind of a fertile land, if you will, that allows people to explore their consciousness, their identity, their beliefs, their backgrounds, their traumas, their dreams, their aspirations, their stories, their identities, and all of it in between. And to do it in a way that is with another person or other people that have walked the path, and to do it in a way that is uh, mutual. Because while one day you might be in need of guidance, someday in the line of our lives or in a particular other area of life, you might be an amazing guide for someone. And so it creates this mutuality of paying it forward, of sharing, of learning from one another. And we're building a platform that attributes all of that and creates this beautiful tapestry of people's stories and experiences and attributes for the benefit of helping people and helping people to be happier and healthier and more productive and joyful in their lives.
Excellent. Excellent. Um, are there I'm thinking about it from like a legal challenges
Yeah,
perspective. Can you speak to that a little bit? Are there
yeah. Great question.
counseling or liability issues you need to address?
Yeah. So I talked about my journey to moving out to Phoenix. So we spent almost 3 years prior to that, as we were commercializing the business, 3 years working on this exact question, building out the technology,
Okay.
validating that this idea of peer to peer would be a perception of value on both sides, that like both sides of that relationship sees value in talking with one another,
Right.
navigating the standard of care and transitions of care and escalated situations where we need to intervene to help someone in certain situations. And also to clarify, like, what is peer support and what is not our area? What do we not provide? We don't provide clinical support. We don't provide professional services. We don't, in terms of financial services or other services, we don't sell certain products. We don't address addiction and recovery and crises that are acute in nature. But we've built processes and implementations, integrations that allow people to get the support that they need, such as talking to their employee assistance program or getting access to a clinical network or getting access to addiction services or getting access to other services that help them. But we don't do that. We just help communicate them to the right place that they need it. But what we do is provide that human to human relationship. Someone who's been there, someone who gets it, someone who can be understanding, empathetic, someone who can share their perspective and say, hey, I wish I knew this, or here's things to look out for. Or, in my experience, I wish I had known about this, or things that people said. And that informs you as a human being to use your own discernment and your own wisdom and your own questions and say, what's good for me? How do I figure this out? Right. And that's something that is we all do it already. We just figured out a way to create a structure around it and to create an
Right.
incentive around it.
Is there a rating system,
Yes.
or is there a way to, let's say, oh, I'm having trouble with my toddler, but I don't want advice from a super strict parent.
Yeah.
We're very free
Yeah.
range oriented, and can you speak to how that system matches that?
Yeah. So two parts, that's a two-part question. So yes, after every interaction, which through the platform can happen via video call, phone call, or text interactions, it's all HIPAA compliant as well, even though it's not our standard. We've built a HIPAA compliant platform.
Huh.
Every interaction is rated, right? So you can
Okay.
say on a scale of 1 to 5, that was this a good session? Was the insight gain valuable? Did it help me? Whatever it is. And so we have a team that's doing inquiry into anything below a certain standard that we have. And that standard is very high, as you can imagine, for the exact reasons that you asked. What are the risks? What are the compliance considerations? And so we want to make sure people are having a great experience. But then to your point, as a precursor to all of that, when we bring on guides, right, we have a profile where we have attributes of them. What is
Okay.
their personality? What's their demographics? What's their background? What's their education? What's their professional story? What's their success? And a lot of it's all self-disclosed, right? And you fill it out. And what's your experience? Certain topics. Are you a parent? Right? And so there's a there's a layer of information and data that we collect on both sides of the platform. And then there's a metadata element that happens, just like it happens with, a Match.com or other services where it's kind of working in the background to enrich the matching that takes place between what we learn about you as a profile and how you interact with the platform. And so
Okay.
that's where the technological side comes into play versus just the human side.
So you kind of answered my question when you mentioned the privacy stuff, I think, because
Yeah,
a lot of this is going to be this way, virtual, right? Through
all
telecommunication.
virtual, all virtual.
No personal community building.
No, so we do virtual community building, but nothing not is not done in person. So, and I'll come back to it. There's one
Okay.
exception, which is not an exception, but there's a distinct offer that we do.
Okay.
But to your point, we after the guides go through the process to be screened and background checked and go through our required training and our elective training and our process, they sign confidentiality agreements and they sign code of conduct agreements, both of which need to be active to be a participating guide on the platform.
Okay.
We incentivize their wanting to be part of that in a variety of ways. Um, and so that's important. And then and we also provide training about standard of care, transitions of care, escalations, risks, prevention of suicide or at-risk
Mhm.
behaviors, things of that nature. This is all part of the training that we have a team of clinicians and professionals that oversee that. And then when it comes to in person, the only thing that we do in person is because our clients, the buyers or the payers of the platform, are corporate clients. We will sometimes bring a guide or a couple guides on site to a headquarters for a launch event where they might share their story. They might talk about why they're a guide. They might,
Okay.
talk a bit about that in a format um, where they're speaking to their broad experience, but they're not having guide sessions, right? And that's really the
Right.
extent of the in-person interactions where at a corporate
Okay.
level, we might do a live event, but outside of that, 98% of it is done all virtually through our platform or through events that we host virtual format.
Okay. Okay. So, is there I can imagine some people would just be happy to do this at some level, so many hours a week or a month or whatever. Uh, if there's a need for certain ones, is there a pay scale for any of the guides?
Great question. So yes, we have dialed in pay bands relative to experience, education criteria, supply and demand of a particular topic,
Okay.
ratings, different criteria that drive that, and a different and duration. There's a bunch of different factors that go into that. But yeah, it's to your astute observation. The primary reason why people become a guide is because they want to have some degree of purpose. They want to
Mhm.
pay it forward. They say to themselves, I wish I had a guide when this happened to me, right? I wish this is a really challenging moment in my life, and it adds more meaning and more purpose for me to share the experience and help someone else on the pathway, right? And so there's an intrinsic compensation or value that's there in doing
Sure.
some mutuality of healing as well. But then we've also, to your point, figured out a financial scale. We figured out educational incentives. We figured out community incentives that we offer as
Okay.
part of being a guide. So
I imagine as people use the service, they might say, "Oh, I could be a guide. I really enjoyed this," right? And so it can snowball in that sense.
yes.
But what's your outreach to acquire guides in the initial
Yeah, so
onboarding part?
to your point, we now have an active waiting list of guides because to your comment, it's not uncommon that people who are using the platform at some point say, I want to share my experience as a guide in this. And so they'll come in, they'll go through our screening process. They might not get activated right away, so which is why there's that waiting list, because it is
Hmm.
dialed into supply and demand of
Okay.
topics and certain elements. But it happens quite often. But so going back, one of the first topics that we launched in was in caregiving, right? So the idea was dementia caregivers specifically, and that was a really interesting kind of spectrum because that had so many sub-components, right? There's the caring itself, like provision of care. There's the identity, there's the stress, there's the evolution of disease, there's navigating the healthcare system, there's financial stressors that take place, there's planning for life transitions, senior care management and facilities management, there's eventual life transition and grief and loss. And so you have all these different kind of subcomponents. And there's a lot of heaviness there because there's an identity in that. For a lot of caregivers, that becomes a decade or more of their life that they're doing that.
Right.
And so the ability to transmute that and to process that in a way that's helpful and builds community and builds network and it honors all else, it honors that loved one, it honors that person's journey and story, it honors the new person that's coming in, right? It very much does all that in a really fascinating way. So I think I answered your question. That might have been a little bit of deviation, but I think I got to your question on that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, is there a so is what level of
Oh, I remember. Sorry, I remember the question. So, using that scenario, that case, we
Mhm.
targeted Facebook groups and we targeted the Alzheimer's Association. And we said, hey, if you've been a caregiver and you've gone through this process and you want to help
Right.
another caregiver in the journey, come talk to us. And what we found was the interest to be a guide was far beyond our modeling. Like the desire
Okay.
to help was way beyond what we expected, right?
Okay.
And then what we found was that same approach, whether it be navigating a divorce or caring for children or transitioning from the military to civilian life, the desire to be helpful to someone's fellow human beings on the path exceeded the standard. And so now it's just to the point where it's mostly just generated through word of mouth or through
Okay.
firsthand experience. Yeah.
Okay. Or I imagine if a new category comes up, you can just some new outreach or something.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
actually, real quick, I just made a comment on that. So
yeah.
it's relevant right now. One of the things that we've done in support and response to what's happened in LA with the fires, because they're our neighboring state and city, is we've stood up an offer called our Los Angeles Fire Initiative. So we've recruited guides who have been through a total disaster loss in, say, like Hurricane Katrina, right? And
Okay.
they've gone and they've rebuilt their lives. They know what that process is, and we're not supporting them on like here's how you work with FEMA and here's how you deal with insurance and how you do this, but we're providing like the relational element of like I'm overwhelmed. I don't know what to do. Like this is going to be years of rebuilding and reprocessing my life. How do I do this? But having someone else to give you hope, to talk you through it, to be a sounding board, to have a family container for others that are going through it, it's invaluable. And so we've stood that up and we're giving that away to certain families of clients of ours or organizations that want to just give that away. We're offering that complimentary as a service to those communities.
Okay. Excellent. Excellent. That's awesome, Derek. So, My next question was the anonymity of the interactions and stuff,
Yeah.
right? If it sounded like you were trying to keep people from connecting too much,
Yeah.
how do you
So
do that?
it's all first name, last initial. So
Okay.
that's there's no, the first name is there, but there's no exchange of information. All the communications are proxied, right? It's not sharing
Okay.
the actual phone number. It's not taking them offline. It's all through our platform. And like I said, in order to be a practicing member on the platform, you sign that, excuse me, that code of conduct agreement or that confidentiality agreement. And so,
And we won't exchange phone numbers and connect some other way.
correct. And if you do that, I guess there's always a risk, but then they open themselves up to certain risk and liability that probably is
Right.
not worth it to them to do that, right? And so,
Right.
yeah.
Right. So yeah, that's I used to volunteer a lot. And one of the things we would do back in Utah was we would teach English as a second language. And
Yeah.
they would, they'd say, yeah, don't ever hold class at your home and other stuff. We'd meet in libraries and other stuff for a
Awesome.
long time. But I had a group that was really good. I knew them really well. And the library closed one night and it was like, I live around the corner. Let's just do it there.
Perfect.
Right. But they frowned upon that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess you can't stop people, but they're not kicked off or anything per se for
Well,
doing
if
that.
they violated that, we found out about it. Yeah, they would be.
Oh,
That's
okay.
so.
Okay.
Yeah, there's certain parameters around how we manage that, and different use cases. But broadly speaking, that's a big one. So.
Okay. 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 Um, so what was one of the biggest challenges for you at Lifeguides?
Oh, I
Setting
mean,
it up and so forth.
I can sum it up on a simple level. We commercialized this business essentially in Q1 of 2020. Uh,
Okay.
remember what happened in Q1 of 2020?
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, that was a really wild time. And so we were, I always say, we talk about this, my colleagues and I, if we had been 18 months earlier in our launch cycle, it would have been kind of probably awesome for the business. We would have rode that mental health kind of wave of like
Right.
people were just clamoring.
Right.
For
For
us, because
connection.
we were new and novel approach to doing this, a lot of the questions that you're asking, a lot of our buyers were asking, and they weren't ready to take that take that leap of faith at the moment because they were just in crisis.
Okay.
But now, over the course of time, as we've continued to steadily grow and build the reputation and the credibility of our customers, we're now extremely well positioned with how the market has matured and converged in the sense that we trademarked this idea of intelligence assistance using AI for the purpose of empathetic connection, for resource sharing, for helping people 5 years ago. Right. So we were early on that. We were building in this tech 5 years ago. And so
Okay.
we're using that to our advantage now. The need to reevaluate how health insurers or insurance providers provide healthcare has evolved dramatically because of the pandemic. So things that we saw being in 2030 through remote work and through teleservices and other things have happened now, and we're ready to support that because of what we've done. And just the overall shift and adoption of telemedicine and teleservices and remote interactions has become mainstream in a way that
Right.
having this conversation right now. And that's been a huge boon and kind of establishing what we do. And then lastly, like I said, there's been a cultural shift that it's moved away from stigma to the other side where we have a supplier shortage, right? You can't even get a clinician now for 2 or 3 months at times when you need one for mental health. And so we fill an amazing gap to
Right.
manage risk, to manage experience, reduce cost, help employers serve their people better in a way that they could not otherwise do. And so that's why a lot of large employers here in the Valley have partnered with us, and other employers around the country and even North America are partnering with us now. So we're
Okay.
only
That's
domestic
excellent.
at the moment, or North America only, but we will be globally scaling in the coming years.
Okay. Awesome. 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 So let's talk a little bit about that. So before we talk about the 1, 5, 10 year plans and initiatives for
Yeah.
Life Guides, let's just talk about what success looks like for you right now. You seem to be growing your client base. Is it several niche markets or growing markets right now, or
Yeah, we have a really strong vertical developing supporting higher education institutions, so large
okay.
universities and others. That's in a vertical where we support their faculty and staff. Right
Okay.
now, we're not supporting students yet, but that's being discussed. We do a lot of work in retail settings, for instance, retail stores and hospitality,
Oh, okay.
healthcare, right? Think about hospital systems,
Right.
insurance payers. That's an area that's growing for us as well. And in fact, we have a partnership with SHRM, the Society for Human Resource Management, where their enterprise sales team is bringing us to Fortune 2000 companies as a value-added service. They're selling our platform, and so that's in its early stages of development, but we've been
Okay.
working on that for the last 6 months, and it's just starting to hit its stride. So to answer your question, right now our biggest focus is on scaling the business in terms of new customers, new clientele, continuing to provide amazing service to those clients, continuing to provide, most importantly, amazing service to the members, because they
Right.
drive, it's the whole, circle of excellence and feedback that we receive, and also continue to build a community of guides, right, that are doing this for the right reasons and that we're managing that. All the
Right.
questions you've asked will continue to evolve and develop more as we grow and scale. So
Okay. And I imagine you
those,
just sort of you
yeah,
you bring in more guides as the members demand.
that's
Okay.
correct. That's correct.
Okay. Okay. Excellent. Um, is there a an exit strategy? Are you hoping to go public? Is there some sort of
Yeah. Yeah, great
yeah.
question. I mean, that was the desire, was to go public, right? That was the initial founding desire of being here. Like I said,
Okay.
build amazing, grow from the ground up to global support in the valley. And myself and my partners were all experienced entrepreneurs, capital backgrounds, business backgrounds, operating backgrounds, and we all know that by building a great business, you create optionality, and we'll do
Sure.
what's right for the people that we serve and for our shareholders. We are a public benefit corporation, so our mission is just as important as making money, and we've aligned ourselves with financial stakeholders that see the value of doing well while doing good, and we believe fully you can do the both things concurrently, and so that's part of our path.
Okay. Excellent. Excellent. Good answer, Derek. I love it. All
Thank you.
right. Well, so can you speak just a little bit more about maybe the impact you're having here in Phoenix? Do you get any more and more clients here?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say a couple of the local brands that we serve, some of the larger brands that you would know, University of Phoenix, Drive Time, Carvana's parent company,
Okay.
Sonora Class Labs. We're
Excellent.
in fairly active conversations with, both large Arizona universities, University of Arizona and Arizona State,
Okay.
as potential clients. So, and then we have a number of, smaller, more privately owned businesses here in the Valley that we serve as well, in different ways. And then, like I said, all over the country, we're serving clients in different verticals. But we believe that we're on the path. As I say, I said this the other day, we just hosted our executive HR annual retreat just last week, at the Sheridan Grand Wild Horse Pass, and we had about 80 top CHROs from top brands and partners that you would know around the country, some major players. And I said, this is Everest for us, right? This is base camp. We're just at the point now where we've started the real climb, right? But it took a ton
Okay.
of work, a ton of effort, a ton of resources to get to
Right.
that point. Because for all the reasons you talked about, I know I gave you very crisp answers, but the amount of hard work and teamwork and financial resources that went into solving those problems was
Right.
considerable. And then to be able to prove
Well,
this.
that's why you had good answers.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. It means a lot for you to say that. So it's been a labor of love, but we're tested and ready for prime time, as they say.
Yep. Awesome. Excellent. I'm excited for you. Do you have any plans or initiatives in 2025? Anything you're launching in particular?
Like I said, we're doing this LA Fire Initiative response. That's something that
Right.
we've launched right now in response. It will become a template for how we can serve other similar situations in the future. Where there's a
Right.
need. We plan to use this as a way to do that. It could be any type of situation.
Right.
So that's one thing we're doing. And then, as I said, we're really just focusing on further enhancement of our team and the current list of topics that we support, making sure the guides community is well supported, and providing great service to our existing clients so that we're ready to bring on even more and larger books of business. But I mean, the founding idea of this business was, how do we build a business that serves 1 billion people, right? It might not be directly, to be clear, but through this one-to-one relationship. That's how you affect families. That's how you affect
Yep.
companies. That's how you affect communities. And as we gain root in the broader healthcare business ecosystem of hundreds of millions of families, right? And that's the aspirational number we're playing at. And we think about going global to have other, hundreds of millions of families on our platform. That number of 1 billion people impacted becomes very, very real, right? And
Right.
so that's what we're playing for with this business.
Okay, love it. Excellent. So I have a reflection question for you.
Yeah.
What do you wish you knew about building wealth and success earlier in your career?
I mean, what I would say is there's no easy path. Just a simple answer. Anybody who tells you that as an entrepreneur, that there's the easy path to make 6 and 7 and 8 figures, that's just not true. It requires a tremendous amount of work and resilience and resourcefulness and networking and relationship building and agility and adaptability and not quitting and trying again and just keeping going over and over and over again. That's how you build a great business. That's how you build wealth. That's how you build prosperity. And I mean, I'm 15 years into this journey, right? Literally. So puts it in perspective for you. And like I said, I've achieved some level of success, but to play at the level that we're playing at, that's a lifetime of work and effort and
Right.
contribution. So
That's a great answer. Great answer, Derek. It doesn't get easier, you get better.
Well said. Well said.
Okay, so Derek, if people would like to connect with you and learn more about Lifeguides, what should they do?
I would love that. You can find us at www.lifeguides.com, just like it's spelled. We'll drop that in the show notes for your listeners and your audience. And then you can find me on LinkedIn, on other social media channels. I'm out there, but would love to connect with the community, especially here in the Valley. It's important to us to build local, so we can serve global.
Awesome. Good stuff. Good stuff. All right. Well, thank you everybody for listening and watching. Thank you very much, Derek Lundsten, for joining me today.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for the questions, Tim.
Thank you. Yeah, we appreciate you sharing your story and your insights and all about Lifeguides and the impact it's having throughout the country and someday the world.
Inspired by our guests? Visit phoenixprosperitypodcast.com/guest and join us on the show and share your success story with Tim. The spotlight awaits.